minor amounts elsewhere in the region. So that just gives you an idea of what's happening in the region. Indonesia, imports of soybean meal continue up. I mean, in the middle of a recession, people telling me that they figure that Indonesia was flat up this last year in consumption. And that's pretty amazing in the middle of what we're seeing in the world today. Thailand, imports of soybeans and soybean meal. Again, a good year in 2009 in Thailand, according to USDA estimates. Philippines, soybean meal in 08-09 up some, according to USDA. Bean imports down, and they're projecting a recovery and even growth next year. Vietnam, that's been the real boom area for soybean meal demand in this part of the world. You can see going from 422,000 tons up to 2.4 million tons in 07-08, and projected this next year to be 2.5. We'll see if that occurs, because we certainly saw a decline this last year. And then let's look at Europe. Europe's an interesting market, and its imports of soybeans are going down, and that's because the crushers over there are crushing more rapeseed because a lot more is available. And they're importing more meal to make up for the lack of production domestically. Here's the crush volume in Europe of soybeans and rapeseed. As you can see, they just crossed each other because Europe is putting so much incentive into growing rapeseed. They're getting great yields, and they're using the rapeseed oil to make biodiesel primarily. And this year we're going to be up around 20 million tons of production in Europe, which is a phenomenal amount of rapeseed. I put this up, I think, last year. This just is a quick thing that tells you what's happened in the last year, both in terms of rising prices and declining prices. It's just an assessment that where I say, if oil is worth $60 a barrel, based on the energy content of a barrel of oil, what's the energy value of corn, wheat, soybeans, and veg oil in terms of if you were to burn it for heat versus burning petroleum? So it's got a value as an energy value. You can see that at $140, we got up to $157, but if you get up to $140 a barrel, you're up there to where veg oil is worth $900 a ton to burn it relative to petroleum. And if you put $1 a gallon subsidy on it like we had in the U.S. for making biodiesel, that raises it another $280 a ton. So you're then looking at over $1,200 a ton value for veg oil just for energy. But as that oil prices comes back down, as you can see, when we get around 80, 60, somewhere in that break, all of a sudden oil prices and the other commodity prices break away from energy and start then being dictated by supply demand for food and feed. But above about $80 on oil, you see your veg oil markets, and to a lesser extent, but certainly corn also being impacted by that. This is just an indication of what happened last year with the price of crude petroleum and soybean oil. You can see anyone that says they're not related wasn't paying attention. Clearly they are. The food industry stepped in and they said, my God, we've got biodiesel capacity in the U.S. that can consume 75–80% of our total fats and oil supply. We have to make the price so high so it's not profitable to do that. And that's what they did. This is consumption of veg oils worldwide for food and for industrial purposes, including biodiesel. And you can see the fastest growth rate has been down there in the industrial area. And that will probably continue as long as we've got pressures for environmentalism, concerns about global warming, and you name it, is moving in that direction. Now let's shift over quickly to corn. This is corn supply of production and consumption. You can see real tight balance between the two going through there. This year, USDA is projecting consumption and production will all be almost identical. We'll see. Largest corn producers, this is where the United States is so dominant. There is no question the one crop we dominate in terms of competitiveness, in terms of our land, our weather, our farmers' technology, the soils, and everything is corn. We can grow corn better than anyone else in the world in the greatest volume. Then it's China, then the EU, and you can see it quickly falls off. But the U.S. is the dominant supplier of corn. If you look at corn production in the U.S., trend is certainly up We're seeing yields that are much better now than they were 5 years ago. Farmers are telling, they used to say, oh, if I could get 160, 70 bushels an acre, man, I'd really be happy. That's Illinois. Now they're saying if I don't get 220 bushels an acre, they're disappointed because some of the new varieties have really added, the triple stack varieties have really added to their potential. This is average corn yields in the U.S. We're projecting, we did have a high record back in 2004, but we're projecting now this year to almost be that, and some groups have come out for estimates that are higher than the record back in 2004. But certainly looks like there's a trend upward in yields. And that's pretty good because we've expanded corn into areas that are not that good suited for corn and don't have that good of yields. So it's in fact pretty phenomenal. This is average corn yields in the U.S. and the rest of the world. When I said we've got an advantage, you can see how much how much higher yields are in the U.S. than the rest of the world. In fact, if you look at the average corn yields in the U.S., China, and India, that really tells you. China's the second largest corn producer in the world, and their yield is about half of that in the U.S. If China decided tomorrow to say, okay, Monsanto, Syngenta, Pioneer, come on over, bring your varieties, we'll let you charge the biotech premiums for the crop, and the farmers could in fact be convinced to show how to plant those seeds and how to fertilize them, they can raise their yields a lot. I don't think China is going to do that because they don't want to see that money flow to those major companies. They're going to try to develop the technology themselves, and they will over time. But clearly, China has got the potential to greatly expand yields. I think India probably does too, but less extent because of rainfall availability and land quality. This is corn production and consumption in China. That's the one that everybody watches. And, you know, when is China going to, are they going to export corn or are they going to import corn? We'll see. This year, the drought in Jilin province and part of Heilongjiang province may very well cause China to get tight on corn. We don't know what that is. Now, they've got fairly good reserve stocks that they bought a year ago, but we'll see what happens this year. If that crop is smaller, you might see China not export it, and you might even see it in the south maybe import a little bit. Again, I'll watch it like you do because we don't know. This is the largest corn consumers in the world. The U.S. is still, we produce the most and we consume the most. China is second, then the EU, Brazil, Mexico, India, Japan. The key, though, is who are the exporters? If you want corn, it's the same three people that export soybeans. U.S., Brazil, and Argentina, but in this case, much more dominance of the United States because we're the one with the supply. And, you know, that's going to continue to grow. And we're only exporting about 25% of our crop. The largest importers, obviously you see Japan is by far the largest net importer of corn, almost all of it from the United States. Mexico, Korea, Taiwan, again, the three of the countries in the Near East or the Far East are the biggest importers. Then you see it slips down in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. But again, you see who the importers are. This is global consumption for feed and food, seed and industrial products. As you can see, the growth has not been in feed sector. It's been in the food, seed, and industrial, primarily in the United States for ethanol production. But this is a bit deceiving because what that doesn't show is all the distillers' dried grain that comes out of the ethanol and goes into the feed animals, and which is in the United States and which we're exporting into the rest of the world. If you add that on top of it, we've still had a growth in consumption of corn for feed. But still, it's just direct corn consumption is actually going down. Global consumption